it's not time to start. We probably have more people, will have more people joining over the next couple of minutes or hours, but I think let's start anyway. So we have 33 to 32 participants right now, which is a good number. We have far more registrations than that, so I think there will be more joiners, but let's start because our schedule today is quite tight. Nice to see everyone. It's really great to have so many presenters and also people who are interested in the topic. So thank you all for joining. Looking forward to a good discussion. And on the Estonian behalf of, since Estonia is running this webinar together with VASAB, then just a few opening remarks perhaps. Why we wanted to hold this webinar is two reasons. Firstly, of course, or three reasons. Firstly, because Estonia currently is the chairing country of VASAB, and for those of you who do not know what VASAB is collaboration on spatial planning and territorial development topics. It was formed in the early 1990s, so about more than 30 years old now. And it operates in the Baltic Sea region. So the initial participants or joining countries were basically all the countries around the Baltic Sea. By now, I think Denmark and Norway are not that active in the collaborations, and also Russian and Belarus's participation is suspended due to the war in Ukraine. But all the other countries are quite actively collaborating. That is then Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, also Germany, a part of Germany, and also Sweden are quite active in the collaboration. And VASAB is chaired by the Conference of Ministers, which also every now and then produces ministerial declarations or long-term spatial visions. But the everyday work is managed by VASAB Secretariat and also the committee of the representatives of countries. Many of who you will be actually hearing from today, because many of the presenters are also part of the VASAB committee here. But then another reason why we wanted to hold this webinar is that Estonia is also in the process of making a new national spatial plan. So the selfish reason for us is to get to know the best practices from across the Baltic Sea region and also wider best practices. But I hope there's something in here for everyone, because as you probably know, then spatial planning and spatial governance systems or administrations vary greatly across countries. So spatial planning systems are not always that easy to compare or to learn even from each other because of the different cultural and so on backgrounds. So it might be tricky, but the issues or the challenges we are facing are still the same, and then they often are very visible in space, or the spatial conflicts or spatial needs are quite obvious often. So I think that is still something we can use despite the varying governance situations and cultural backgrounds we have. So I hope there's something here for everyone. And on the practicalities of today's webinar, we will be recording, or VASAB Secretariat will be recording and is hosting on the technical side. We will make the recording available through VASAB channels, YouTube and LinkedIn and others. And we will be using what I'm already sharing on the screen, and I will also put the link in the chat. Is a mural co-working space, let's say, that you can already join. You're free to visit this during the day. And we can use it, I think, for two ways. If you have any longer questions or reflections based on the presentations, I ask you to put them here using these post-its. If you double click with your mouse, you create a new post-it, or you can use the ones that are already here. And add your thoughts, or add your comments, add your reflections, or anything. We can take the shorter questions just after the presentations also, but there's a longer time for discussion in the end of the webinar. So anything you would like to highlight or that was really interesting for you in the presentations, then add your comments here. If you have trouble accessing, then please write in the chat in Teams. Let's try to find a solution, but it should be easy to access. And then also there's another part in the mural where I primarily ask the presenters to contribute, but everybody is also welcome to add their comments as well. Here we have created like a template to try to compare the national spatial strategies we will be covering today. And in a way that by placing the flag icons on these schemes here to answer the questions how, let's say, how important specific certain topics are for the national spatial plans. Feel free to add comments as well, everybody who's on the mural. If you disagree with where the flag is, add your objections, your thoughts, anything, and we can take this also in during the discussion later on. More on the practicalities, we have in the beginning about 2 hours presentations. I'm also very happy to have colleagues from the OECD here. I have worked with both Jay and Andrés before, and presenters from the OECD are great experts in their fields, so happy to have a more broad view as well than just the Baltic Sea region. So we have 2 hours presentations in starting very soon. Then we have a half-an-hour break, and then we have 3 more presentations after the break, and then followed by a discussion. I think that's it on the practicalities. Thank you again for joining. And if you do have any questions or issues with technical things, then feel free to use the chat. But I will now give the floor actually to the first presenter, who is Andrés Fuentes Hutfilter from the Center of Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities at the OECD, where he works as the senior economist and head of unit. So Andrés, you can share your screen, and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Tiit, for your invitation. Yes, let me share my screen quickly. There we go. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tiit, for inviting us to this webinar, this VASAB webinar on national spatial planning. Now, I realize that VASAB stands for vision and strategies around the Baltic Sea, and I think this is a very well chosen name for your initiative. And in fact, this morning I want to provide some arguments why spatial planning is important for strategic policy issues that require vision and will be essential for well-being and regional development. And I will want to do so using demographic change and climate change as examples. And it seems to me that vision and strategy are important for spatial planning, because spatial planning decisions guide long-term decisions on land use, housing, and infrastructure. And these decisions are often costly to reverse. And it is therefore important that these decisions are consistent with the policy challenges that we need to address for climate and demographic change. Else there's a risk that there will be failed investments and higher economic costs later. The converse is also true. With spatial planning, we have a much better chance to succeed the transformations that we need to undertake. I will draw on some examples of the work we have done on the project Shrinking Smartly and Sustainably, it is called, with DG Regio in the European Commission. And I will also draw on our study that, of course, we have done with you, Tiit, Shrinking Smartly in Estonia. And the main author of this study will speak just after me, I think, Jay. So this is the very simple outline of the presentation. So I will first argue that demographic change and climate change require place-based policy responses that differ across subnational regions. And then I will provide a few arguments about the contributions spatial planning can make. And all along, I think it will be clear that granular geospatial data can help identify the challenges and some of the spatial planning responses. And analysis of geospatial data is one of the strengths of the work that we do in our division. So, for example, regions differ. Subnational regions differ in the level of their greenhouse gas emissions, in the sectoral composition of these emissions, and in emissions per capita. And this chart shows this for different types of regions across the urban-rural spectrum in OECD countries. Per capita greenhouse gas emissions tend to be highest in remote rural regions. This is what the blue line shows in this chart. So reaching climate neutrality, as indeed we need to, may affect them the most, even though in absolute terms, 60% of emissions are generated in metropolitan regions. And this is shown here in the bars. The transport emissions are typically particularly important in remote rural regions. These are here in blue. And decarbonization of transport requires a different approach in rural regions than in cities. Cities will be able to reduce individual car use the most, whereas remote regions will eventually be able to benefit the most from lower operating costs of electric vehicles. The availability of land for renewable electricity generation is, of course, another important issue that concerns land use and spatial planning and concerns them differently in rural and urban regions. And these differences are even more striking if you look at individual regions. We've done statistical analysis to show that the sectoral composition of regional emissions varies more strongly across regions within countries than across countries. The exposure to future climate hazards and the vulnerability to such hazards, it's also spatially different. And this is illustrated here for the variability in mean seasonal water availability expected at 2-degree global warming. This is what this map shows. So this index shows the locations where the differences between wet and dry seasons are expected to increase, which means that seasonal water availability will become more unpredictable in the colored regions, with the biggest risks colored in black. Well, high seasonality is related to risks of seasonal drought, for example, in agriculture, as well as flooding during wet seasons. Oops, it was a little bit too quick. And of course, spatial planning decisions will also need to reduce the vulnerability to these exposures. Turning to demography, in many OECD and EU countries, regional population decline already concerns a majority of what we call small regions here at OECD. These small regions, or TL3 regions in our technical terminology, are typically regions below the regional political level. So for example, in Germany, they are the Landkreise. They are shown here for a large number of OECD and EU countries. So what this chart shows is that in many regions, population has declined by more than 0.8% per year over 20 years. So that makes more than 15% decline over the full 20-year period. And if we zoom down to the municipal level, the numbers would be even more impressive. And in most regions with declining populations, the shrinking has become stronger. It has intensified. This is what is shown here in dark blue. So the dark blue shows the percentage of regions where declining population trends have intensified. In only a few regions, shrinking has moderated. And this is in the deep blue color. We find a significant proportion in Latvia and Estonia, but elsewhere, where many shrinking regions, the dark blue dominates. So in general, only in a few regions shrinking has moderated, and very few regions have transitioned from decline to stability. And we have found no shrinking region that has durably transitioned to growth. And so this means that in shrinking regions, we need place-based policies that prepare regions for lasting population decline. Now, spatial planning is an important policy approach to address these challenges. Spatial planning can contribute to addressing both greenhouse gas emissions and the well-being challenges that result from demographic change. And one approach is to limit land consumption and encourage densification. Higher built-up area use per capita is associated with both higher costs of primary school provision across OECD countries, as well as with higher greenhouse gas emissions per capita. Accessibility analysis can help identify how much time it takes to reach key public facilities from settlements, helping to take decisions where such facilities should be placed. Countering the loss of scale economies that can result from population shrinkage, while keeping access to public services at good levels. An interesting approach is to identify regional centers that can provide clustered services to surrounding smaller settlements. And this is illustrated here for the town of Ballarat in the Australian state of Victoria. And once such regional centers have been identified, this can guide the provision of transport infrastructure and transport services, as well as the public services themselves, health and education, for example, and it can also guide decisions around the densification of settlements. And this kind of analysis is also one of the things that we have done here in our Economic Analysis, Data and Statistics division. Population decline can result in a spiral of falling house prices and degrading built environments. In Estonia, for example, apartment prices have been up to 10 times higher in urban centers than in shrinking rural areas. This is what this map shows. Now, falling house prices can reduce collateral values and therefore the capacity to invest, including in the needed refurbishment of housing. And there can also be negative effects on mobility of people. Also in terms of mobility to the depopulating regions, especially if there are problems with the quality and connectivity of dwellings in these regions. And that can in turn contribute to skills shortages, which often characterize these regions. So spatial housing policy needs to prevent such dynamics and can help provide low-cost yet attractive living conditions in depopulating regions. And one approach is urban regeneration, for example, especially in regional service centers, and a targeted approach to the repurposing and demolishing of buildings. So to conclude, trivializing or denying these strategic issues that we are facing can make policy responses costlier in terms of their economic cost. But using spatial planning in developing policy responses can help even to turn a problem into an opportunity. And this illustration here shows this for demographic change. Because rather than merely managing depopulation as a problem, spatial planning can help harness population decline as an opportunity, as in the example of the low-cost housing that depopulating areas can provide. Similarly, spatial planning approaches to address climate change can also provide opportunities, for example, to reduce pollution and traffic congestion, which many of us are struggling with every day, and provide well-being benefits from nature-based solutions to flood protection, for example. And these can also translate into spatial competitiveness gains. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrés. Thank you for arguing for spatial planning as the policy tool to tackle our challenges. I think there's one comment in the chat, but if you would like to have a look, but if there's no more specific questions right now, there's also one posted at the mural board, which I actually added, which we can perhaps discuss later on in the discussion part. But if there's no very specific questions right now, then, or would you like to shortly respond to this comment?
Yeah, I can try. I see. It's about. I suppose it's from Poland. We have a comment from Jacek Zauka. Sorry, I must be pronouncing that imperfectly. You're saying that rural remote regions, at least in Poland, are relatively poor. They cannot afford electric cars as presented in the first presentation. Yes, well, it is true that the cost of buying electric vehicles is buying an electric vehicle is still much more expensive than buying a conventional car. Now, the projections that we have suggest that this will change, that the cost of producing batteries and electric motors is declining, and there's an expectation that in some years they may be cheaper to buy than conventional cars. And we know that electric vehicles are already much cheaper to operate because they're more energy efficient, and electricity can also be cheaper than petrol. And so, because car use is more intensive in rural regions than in urban regions, and because these rural regions are also more dependent on their cars, there's an opportunity there that I think will materialize in the future, that rural regions can benefit from the lower use cost of these cars. But to benefit from it, we need to prepare the charging infrastructure, which is a bigger challenge in rural regions because of the lower population density.
Okay. Thank you very much for addressing the comment, and I think we'll thank you for your presentation also. Let's move on for now, and if you can stay with us also longer, then thank you very much. Next we have Jaebeum Cho, also from the Center of Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities at the OECD, working as economist and policy analyst. So Jay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tiit. I'll share my screen. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Tiit, for inviting us today, and thank you to the audience for joining us. I'm Jaebeum Cho. I'm an economist and policy analyst at the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities, and I also coordinate the workstream helping regions adapt to demographic change. Today, I'll be presenting some cross-cutting themes for spatial planning that are more or less based on the OECD's work on the governance of land use and spatial planning across OECD countries that we conducted a few years ago. In particular, I'm going to be trying to highlight some of the key roles that spatial planning should play in order to shape outcomes that both balance public and private interests while achieving desirable societal outcomes. So just to begin, we know that land use and spatial planning are not just technical exercises. They really are at the core of shaping the future of our cities and regions. Each decision about land use affects people's daily lives. For example, the distance to their commutes, the price of their housing, and access to green spaces. We also know that well-managed spatial planning is a driver of economic development. It can ensure that investments in infrastructure, housing, and industry are well placed, and this in turn reduces inefficiencies and costs. Spatial planning also matters, as Andrés mentioned in the previous presentation, for environmental considerations. And this is because land use is directly linked to climate change and sustainability. Here, poor planning leads to urban sprawl, loss of biodiversity, and inefficient energy use. And in contrast, strategic planning can reduce emissions, promote green energy, and protect critical ecosystems. Finally, there are social and quality of life aspects. We know that spatial planning plays a critical role in people's well-being because it determines access to things like housing, public transport, and healthcare and education. So as spatial planners, we know that national planning frameworks are in principle meant to guide land use, infrastructure, and development priorities, among other things. When we take a look across OECD countries, we can see that more than 3/4 of national plans include broad policy guidelines, and about 60% contain strategic plans. Most national plans do not include detailed boundary plans, except for some very specific countries in the OECD, such as Israel. Many national plans are also legally binding, with around 70% of national plans imposing legal obligations on public authorities. What we know, however, in practice is that enforcement is inconsistent in many cases, with 1/3 of national plans being strictly binding, while another 1/3 allowing various exemptions. More importantly, even when national plans are legally enforceable, we know that in practice, they don't always influence local decision-making. And when you ask why does this happen, you have several reasons. First, many national plans tend to use a bit of vague or flexible language, and this is either to allow adaptation at the local level or because policymakers can't agree on the clear mandates at the national level. Second, enforcement tools are often weak. National governments may not have the authority or resources to ensure compliance. And third, local governments ultimately control many planning decisions. And if a national plan doesn't align with their priorities, they may deprioritize it or ignore it altogether. This is in many cases common, for example, in infrastructure planning, where national plans often propose major projects, but if funding mechanisms aren't built in, implementation really is dependent on the local willingness to invest. And of course, we know that politics plays a role as well. Here, even when enforcement mechanisms exist, authorities may choose not to enforce plans due to political considerations. So for spatial planning to function effectively at a national scale, The OECD, it's in the report, but we suggest that stronger alignment mechanisms are needed. This in practice means that ensuring that national plans are not only legally enforceable, but also supported by financial incentives, integrated monitoring systems, and better coordination between levels of government. And without these measures, national plans can become more aspirational rather than actionable, and which can lead to fragmented development and policy misalignment. So one of the central challenges of spatial planning is balancing private property rights and the public interest. Land is unique, then it is a resource in that it is often privately owned, but how it is used affects everyone. So in this sense, the decisions made by a single landowner have wider economic, environmental, and social consequences. So in this regard, there are some risks of purely market-driven land use. When left entirely to market forces, land use can become fragmented, inefficient, and inequitable. That's because developers will naturally seek to maximize profits, which can lead to adverse effects, including sprawl, speculation in markets, and environmental degradation. For example, unchecked development may create expensive, low-density suburbs or push lower-income groups out of well-connected areas. And of course, we know that this is where spatial planning comes in. Arguably, the most important role of spatial planning is to ensure that private land development aligns with broader societal objectives. It should also help to prevent negative externalities like congestion, pollution, and unaffordable housing markets. However, we all know that this isn't always easy to achieve in practice. Governments, they need to mediate between competing interests, between landowners, developers, businesses, and communities, among other stakeholders. So here, some want less regulation to maximize flexibility and profits, while others demand stronger rules to protect public goods, like green spaces or historical sites. The key here is that spatial planning should be both predictable and adaptable. What this means in practice is that spatial planning should set clear rules to protect the public interest while also allowing for flexibility to respond to changing needs. It also means that, importantly, using incentives such as financial incentives, taxes, and not just restrictions on land use to encourage land use for the greater good of society. On the more substantive side, I also want to highlight why compact and efficient spatial development should be a key objective of spatial planning. First, we need to note that compact development is not just about fitting more people into a given area. It's an essential strategy to reduce infrastructure costs, improve service delivery and accessibility, and also support economic growth through agglomeration benefits. However, uncoordinated expansion or peri-urbanization can create inefficiencies that can become quite costly. When people live far from their workplaces and amenities, it increases congestion and also places a financial strain on municipalities. When we look at the figure here that compares population changes on the x-axis to changes in built-up areas on the y-axis, we can see that on average, built-up areas increased by over 10% across the span of 10 years. I've highlighted the Baltic countries here. The Baltic countries seem to be doing a little better compared to the OECD average, but still, we have to consider that many regions in Baltic countries, as Andrés mentioned in the previous presentation, many regions in these countries are losing population. And considering that, the amount of new development is still quite significant. And this can be a problem, especially as population decline begins to strain public finances, and sparse development makes public services more expensive to provide. So the key here is that to achieve dense and efficient development patterns, national spatial planning should be well integrated with strategic planning, and there should be a strong governance mechanism that supports coordination across and within levels of government to ensure that development is coherent with broader interests. Another important agenda that the OECD tends to emphasize a lot is the need for flexibility. First, we can briefly discuss why flexibility in spatial planning is important. For one, economic conditions are constantly changing, and cities and regions have to adapt to shifting demographics and new economic trends. In some cases, very rigid land use regulations can actually prevent necessary development. And this is, for example, when zoning rules restrict mixed-use developments with higher densities in areas that would benefit from them. And here, a more discretionary approach can allow planning to be responsive to emerging challenges rather than strictly following land use plans that may become outdated. But on the flip side, of course, we also know that some level of regulation is quite essential. In particular, too much unpredictability in spatial planning can discourage investment. So here, if planning decisions are made on a case-by-case basis with no clear framework, businesses and developers may become hesitant to commit to new development projects. And so without rules, planning can also become inconsistent, which leads to longer approval times as every project needs to be debated and negotiated on a case-by-case basis. So while flexibility is important, some level of structure is necessary to ensure the long-term efficient and sustainable development of land. So what spatial plans actually need to do is find the right balance, which is easier said than done, but really there needs to be a right balance between flexibility and rules to encourage a framework for adaptable but also predictable planning. Here, I guess we can suggest that the optimal approach could be to have a broader framework of core regulations, such as for the environment, transportation, and other key sectors, but also allowing for gradual adaptation within the framework. For example, zoning rules should set clear guidelines, but also allow for some adjustments based on demand. A good example, actually, that is highlighted in the report that we published, but is the case of Japan, where actually at the national level, zoning regulations and density restrictions are based on overall nuisance levels and not strictly based on the type of land use. And more details can be found in our report. Another key point is that we need to remember that land use regulations are meant to structure spatial development and not restrict competition. We know that there's a strong connection between spatial planning and market competition because spatial planning not only affects land use, but also affects how businesses enter and compete in markets. But when competition is restricted, consumers can suffer as they face higher prices and reduced choices. And so spatial planning can become anti-competitive when planning policies unintentionally or actually intentionally favor existing businesses over new entrants. A common example here is adverse impact tests, where some jurisdictions require new businesses to prove that they won't harm existing ones. And this effectively grants monopolies to incumbent firms and limits competition. There's also a lot of examples about excessive zoning restrictions that can impede competition. This is when if zoning laws overly separate commercial from residential areas, businesses need to pay high premiums to operate in designated zones, which increases prices. And there's also the misuse of private covenants, where some businesses purchase land and restrict its future use to prevent competitors from entering the market. And so, of course, there's a lot of nuance here, as not all restrictions are bad. However, it is quite certain that they should be carefully designed. For one, spatial plans, they should allow businesses to integrate within communities to reduce costs and encourage local commerce. Also, this relates to the previous point on flexibility, but a possible tool to use could be nuisance-based zoning, which can avoid unnecessary barriers while also ensuring land use remains efficient and sustainable. Another key point to highlight is that spatial planning cannot function effectively in isolation. For spatial planning to achieve its objectives, it has to be complemented by the right incentives that align market forces with spatial policies. We know that most planning systems rely very heavily on zoning and environmental regulations to influence development. However, these types of restrictions alone cannot change the underlying market forces that drive land use and development decisions. And this is because, of course, regulations limit what can and cannot be built, but they do not create positive incentives for development that meet broader societal goals. And in this sense, very rigid spatial planning frameworks often tend to lead to unintended consequences, such as increased land speculation or housing shortages when demand is artificially constrained. And so instead of only restricting land use, spatial planning should also work through incentives that guide behavior in desired locations. And a key tool that in this regard that needs to be utilized in conjunction with spatial planning is fiscal policies and tax incentives. For example, higher property taxes on vacant land can discourage speculative land banking. And another example is when transport subsidies for public transit-oriented developments encourage higher densities near transit hubs. On the flip side, misaligned incentives can actually contradict planning objectives. For example, a common instrument used across the OECD is tax deductions for commuting costs. And these actually have encouraged urban sprawl by making long distance travel more affordable. In addition, things such as government subsidies for detached single-family homes can lead to inefficient land use patterns and higher infrastructure costs. And so overall, by integrating incentives into planning, governments can create a more dynamic and adaptable spatial planning system that balances market efficiency with public objectives. And so here, incentives should not be seen as an alternative to planning, but really as a necessary complement. And moving on, we all know that local governments play a key role in implementing land use and spatial planning. However, we also know that local decisions are not made in isolation. We know that one of the key drivers of local planning decisions is how municipalities generate revenue. In many OECD countries, local governments rely on property taxes, business taxes, and development fees, and this can directly shape their approach to land use. For example, if the municipality depends heavily on commercial taxes, it can prioritize business districts over mixed use or residential areas. In other cases, local governments use land use policies strategically to attract high-value developments that generate more tax revenue. And this is sometimes at the expense of equitable development, for example, via social or affordable housing. And so here, without coordination, which is enabled at a higher level of government, such as at the national level, this type of competition can lead to inefficient development patterns. And municipalities here may favor short-term financial gains. In addition, things such as transport and infrastructure investments become more inefficient when spatial planning is done in isolation. So in order to encourage local governments to think regionally and nationally, we can use, for example, fiscal incentives for intermunicipal cooperation. And this can take the form of national or regional governments providing funding for coordinated strategies for things such as housing and transport. And this would reward municipalities that collaborate. And countries can also implement property tax and sharing models to prevent unhealthy competition for local revenues. Moving on to some more thematic agendas, I'll be very brief on this slide because I think Andrés gave a very good presentation before, but I want to stress how spatial planning should respond to demographic trends. We know that across the EU, for example, 9 out of 10 rural areas will be declining in population by 2050. And we know that this is not just a temporary trend, but that it's going to continue into the foreseeable future because of demographic pressures such as aging, lower birth rates, and also migration into cities. And so just taking a brief look at the figure, it's pretty clear that the percentage of people living in rural areas has dropped across many OECD countries. And there's also a clear pattern of concentration in cities. And this creates a real challenge in how we plan our spaces when there are fewer people to use them. And so spatial planning must adapt. And this is not only by focusing on trying to bring people back to shrinking areas, which tends not to work in the long run. Instead, spatial planning needs to adapt by making smarter land use decisions, such as focusing on compact, well-connected communities. And there's also a need to effectively repurpose empty spaces and deal with abandoned buildings and land through demolition and by returning land back to an undeveloped state. One thing that needs to be really stressed here is that shrinkage isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means that we need to plan differently. So instead of focusing on reversing trends and promoting growth, we need spatial planning that encourages smart shrinking, which relates to making places more livable, more efficient, and ultimately more sustainable. Another key agenda that is common across most all OECD countries is rising housing costs. So housing demand is rising across many OECD countries, yet spatial planning has not always kept pace. Still, it's the case that many spatial planning regulations continue to be too restrictive, which in turn constrains housing supply and drives up prices. There are some barriers to housing development that are pretty common across many OECD countries, and I'm sure they are also in place in some Baltic countries as well. But many countries continue to exercise restrictive zoning laws that prevent densification in well-located areas, while also limiting multifamily housing and mixed-use developments. There's also the issue of complex approval and building permit processes that slow down housing construction, which makes it harder to respond to demand in real time. And so to address these issues, spatial planning needs to focus on promoting greater densification of residential areas and unlocking land for development when needed, and particularly through the utilization of brownfields and greyfields. And overall, spatial planning should encourage upzoning in strategic locations, and there should be a greater focus on transit-oriented development, and also there could be a better use of public-private partnerships and streamlined approvals to accelerate housing delivery while maintaining planning oversight. Another thing to note is that spatial planning integrates multiple policy areas, such as transportation, housing, and infrastructure, and therefore there's a greater need for integration across sectors and levels of government. It's still the case that in most OECD countries, different sectors are often planned separately, and this, of course, leads to inefficiencies and redundancies. When spatial planning is fragmented, it can lead to inconsistent policies at different levels of governance that delays approvals and creates regulatory uncertainty. And here, siloed decision-making in spatial planning can also prevent holistic problem solving, and this makes cities and regions less resilient to challenges like climate change and economic shifts. And so better governance mechanisms are needed to ensure spatial planning works across sectors and government levels. In particular, there's a need for horizontal integration across sectors, but there's also the need for vertical integration across levels of government. And here, we really think that the national spatial plans have a key role to play because they should be providing the framework for integration across sectors and levels of government. And for my final slide here, I want to stress the importance of monitoring and evaluation. And we have to realize that planning decisions shape cities and regions for decades, and so governments need reliable data to access their impact. Here it's important to track key indicators, for example, related to housing supply, transport efficiency, environmental sustainability, and whatnot, to ensure that plans remain relevant. However, it's the case in practice that many governments actually struggle a lot to systematically track the results of their spatial planning policies. And that's because, for one, there's usually a lack of standardized indicators that everyone can agree upon, which makes benchmarking difficult. Also, the impact of spatial planning policies is often long-term, which makes it harder to adjust them in real time. And so to improve decision-making, planning authorities need to do a few things. This includes developing a set of key performance indicators to assess the efficiency of spatial planning, and also related things like land use and infrastructure investments. Here, it can be very useful to actively use technology and data analytics tools, such as GIS, remote sensing, and AI to track changes and identify emerging trends. And finally, there's also a need to establish review mechanisms where monitoring results can effectively inform future spatial planning policy adjustments in a timely way. And I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Jaebeum. So thank you for highlighting some of the complexities of spatial planning and then giving a lot of suggestions on what to actually do. If you don't mind, I also copied some outtakes to the mural from your slides. Thank you very much. I think we don't have time for questions right now, but hopefully you can stay also for the discussion later on. And now we really have to move on. And the next presenter is from Poland. She's Kinga Stańczuk-Olejnik from the Polish Ministry of Development Funds and Regional Policy, and works as a counsellor at the Territorial Development Unit, and speaks about the Polish approach to national spatial planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiit. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for inviting me here to this interesting webinar. And I'm also a member of the VASAB committee. So that's why I'm here. First of all, I would like to scare you a bit with the overview of strategic and spatial planning system in Poland. But you don't need to be afraid. I will not gonna go one by one on this box. By these boxes, I would like to only just to show you how complicated the system in Poland is. The blue boxes concerning the financial documents, and mainly the Ministry of Finance is in charge of that. The green boxes are what our ministry is doing. So this is the national development strategies. The orange ones are on the regional and local level, and on the right hand side you can see the gray boxes, and they are the documents important for spatial planning. And to the spatial planning I will be back later on. And currently Poland is working on changing the main national documents, and here is why we are doing that. We are doing that because we thought that the condition of our daily work of the strategy has changed significantly. As a first phase of the national development concept until 2050, we elaborated, we researched on the mega trends for global, European, and Polish scales. We have also the new legislative amendments to integrate more socio-economic and spatial planning, and introducing new tool to our legal frame. Then, of course, the unexpected events appeared, like the COVID pandemics and the war in Ukraine. And also there are big changes at European level concerning both the new European Commission, European Parliament, but also the future of cohesion policy and negotiation of the new financial perspective. And what are the the changes we discovered through our processes. We indicated 6 global trends that influence Europe, Poland, also our regions and municipalities. First is the growth of global social problems, emergence of the new economy, transformation of the global order, technological acceleration, but also increasing piece of environmental and climate change, and rearranging the space in the different territorial scales. So firstly, I would like to speak about our new umbrella document, the National Development Concept of Poland 2050. It's not strictly the spatial strategy. It's rather like umbrella document. And the idea is that it shows the development of the country in the long run in these rapidly changing circumstances. And this will be the starting point for developing policy in the midterm perspective. And on this scheme, you can see the logic of the document. So already I have presented to you the trends that were discovered during our process. And then our task was to elaborate the vision for future development of Poland for 2050. Based on that, the challenges was elaborated, the 4 main challenges that are needed to deliver to achieve that vision. And also the foresight method were used in this process to encourage our thinking about the achieving that vision in these rapidly changing circumstances. So for Poland, that was the first time when scenarios and foresight was used. And it's the idea was not to show the baseline good and bad scenario, but to show how different the external environment for Poland could be. So we used two different factors. So the level of technology development. So in the first and third scenario, we have the modest technology development, and in the second and fourth scenario, we had the high automation and technology. And the second factor for us was the openness, the level of openness of international society. And for first and second scenario, it was open, and for third and fourth, there was the lack of global cooperation. And that were the different circumstances for testing our vision and to deliver proper challenges for achieving those visions. And on this slide, you can see the challenges that we choose from all these smaller challenges that are important for development of the country. And also you can see how much interconnected between themselves they are. So the first challenge for Poland in the long run is the social transition that favors all social groups. The second one is the modern economy that respects the natural environment and climate. So here I would like to underline that probably for the first time at national level, economy and environment is put together, as the environment is the frame for our development. Then we have the sustainable space that takes into account human and environmental needs. And last but not least is the very important topic, safety and resilience of the state with a strong position in Europe and the world. And based on that challenges and the 7 conclusions that are the strategic choices for development policy for Polish government. So we can say like they are the recommendation for documents. And here I would like to show you just few maps that were prepared during our process. So here you can see the level of vulnerability in different dimensions. So the economic, environmental, and social. And the maps were elaborated during our process. On the map, you can see the synthetic indicator based on mainly on public data, but also on some data from the different research, and mainly they are from 2023, so they are quite fresh. And the maps were prepared at municipal level, so you can see how diverse the Polish territory is concerning these different dimensions. And to wrapping up the challenge concerning safety, we use the resilience map from the EU Resilience Dashboard 2020. So the left-hand side map shows the exposure of EU nation to danger, and the right-hand map is the potential for resilience building. So here you can also see how much our country differs concerning these 2 aspects, and the data is from 2020, so before the Russian aggression towards Ukraine. And here is the part of the slide that I have shown firstly. So as for now, I was explaining you this left-hand side document, so the National Development Concept. So as you could see, it was long-term visionary umbrella document, and the document is still up in the air. We are after the whole process of consultation with public stakeholders, and also we are behind us are the intergovernmental consultation, and now we are waiting for the final step, so the approval of the Council of Ministers. And in the same time, our department is working on the midterm development strategy until 2035. So this is the main document for the country, and this is the strategy, but still it will have important territorial aspect, and it should be approved by the Council of Ministers this year, so 3rd or 4th quarter. And it consists of objectives, measures, and also the new tool model of functional and spatial structure. And based on that document, both documents, midterm development strategy and the national development concept, there will be prepared national regional development strategy, other national strategies, programs, policies, and then the strategies for voivodeships. So one slide about the midterm development strategy. So the horizontal goal is already fixed in the assumptions by the Committee of Council of the Ministries. So the goal is polycentric development of the country. And then we have 3 objectives. So the first one is mitigating demographic changes. Second one is creating conditions for competitiveness and fair economy that respects natural environment and climate. And third one is, of course, strengthening security, resilience, and efficiency of the state. And the strong part of the strategy will be new tool called Model of Functional and Spatial Structure. So in that part, we will have the above the condition, the current condition, current state of country, and plans for future, for main investments, and also rules and recommendations for shaping the spatial policy. And important part of this strategy is so-called in Polish OSI, so the strategic intervention area and the measures for that areas. And second part of my presentation concerns the reform of spatial planning system. The reform was adopted mid-2023, and the idea for the reform was to combining spatial and strategic planning more tight, counteracting the urban sprawl, which remains a big problem, big challenge for Poland, protection of the areas that need it, but also facilitating the investment process, digitalization of spatial planning, streamlining, and speeding up the process and procedures. And here you can see the main changes that occurred at local level. So on the left-hand side, you can see what was the frames, the legal frames for the local development, and actually these can be the frames until the end of this year, because now we are in transition period of implementing this reform. And what changes are important? Previously, the development strategy at local or supra-local level was not obligatory, and now the municipalities or some functional urban areas must prepare such strategy, and the strategy needs to have this functional and spatial structure model. The main change is that previously there was the document that called the Study of Conditions and Directions of Spatial Development of Municipality, and that was the obligatory document which needs to cover all the territory of municipality. And now it was changed into General Spatial Development Plan. And this is important change because this previous study was a kind of internal document for the local government. And now this General Spatial Development Plan, it's a local law. So it's important for all inhabitants, and the rules in it binding the citizens, for example, comparing to the development area in the municipality and protected area in the municipality. And in this local development strategy needs to have this model of functional and spatial structure. And in that model needs to be the structure of settlement network and the place in hierarchy, the natural connections, and also main elements of the transportation network, technical infrastructure, and social infrastructure. And also in the model, part of the model is the arrangements and recommendations for shaping the spatial development policy for the municipality. And my last slide is about one more time about this model of functional and spatial structure, because according to the new law, it will be the part obligatory at regional and local level. but also in this midterm development strategy. For the first time in Poland, will be prepared such a model. So the goal is to enhance the territorial dimension of the strategy and binding more tight the strategic and spatial planning. And the model will be consist of a graphic, so it will have map and text. And the idea is to show in simplified manner territorial dimension of both current and future development of the area. And on the right hand side, you can see the model of Opolskie Voivodeship, which is part of their strategy. And down on the screen, you can see the example of the model of supra local strategy. And the model will be also the help for investors and inhabitants to cooperate and to engage in the local development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kinga, and then thank you for the last slide. That was actually what I was really waiting for, because I think that's a new thing. But thank you for running us through the complex system in a very good way. But I think we have to move on now, and I think we can discuss these topics later on in the webinar. So next up we have from Germany, Jürgen Neumüller, from the Joint Spatial Planning Office of the Berlin-Brandenburg region, and he works as head of European Spatial Development Section. And I think, Margarita, if you could share the slides. Yeah, thank you. And then the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tiit, for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this very interesting meeting. I have to say I'm still have to digest the presentations before mine, because there are so many new developments in Poland ongoing, and what I can show you is more or less the status of the planning system and our regional state planning in Berlin-Brandenburg capital region. So it's as it was said, it's more the formal part, let's say, of the planning system, which I can present to you from a regional perspective. On the next slide, you can see the content. So I will introduce very briefly the planning system and the legal basis of what we are doing here in the spatial planning department, Berlin-Brandenburg. And then there will be one section which will be the main section, the formal state development plan of the capital region, Berlin-Brandenburg, and also a few final remarks about informal spatial developments, which we are also performing here in our region. So let's start with the planning system and the legal base on the next slide. As you might know, Germany is a federal state, so this differs quite significantly from Poland. And we have these 16 states in Germany, and let's say also in spatial planning, 16 legal systems and 16 state administrations. So of course there are some activities on federal level. I will name them very shortly and very briefly, because that's not my part, let's say, to refer about the German approach, but I will have a closer look to the Berlin-Brandenburg approach. On the next slide, you can see also the division of tasks of legislative, executive, and judicative approaches. So on the state level, we have also state parliaments. This is the Landtag, and they are let's say, doing the acts which we have as an administration work on. So I'm part of ministry. In Brandenburg, it's the Ministry of Infrastructure and Spatial Planning. And we are also part as an administration of another ministry in Berlin, of the state of Berlin, which is the Senate Department for Urban Development. So this is our state government, and within this we are doing our state planning. On the next slide, you can see another hierarchy of the planning system and the legal basis. So there's, of course, a national law, the Spatial Planning Act on national level in Germany, which is, let's say, regulating the overall approach for spatial planning. But then the main field is the state spatial planning at our level, so to say, at the level of the Bundesländer. Underneath, there's also the level of regional spatial planning and the land use planning on local level. As it was mentioned just before, this is well established in Germany since many years, that there are so-called Flächennutzungspläne and Bebauungspläne, so local plans, which is the right for the communities to plan on their own communities. So that's the system, let's say, and not to forget, we are doing that not on our own and isolated. So we have to integrate and to consult a lot of public bodies when doing so, and sectoral plannings. So this is maybe very typically also here in Germany that we have sectoral planning on energy, on water, and economic affairs, and so on. So this is not integrated everything into the spatial planning system. So for Berlin-Brandenburg, on the next slide, you see that, as I mentioned, this is a really special thing. At least in Germany, it's unique, our joint spatial planning department, as we are doing the spatial planning for both states, for Brandenburg and for Berlin. And this is regulated in a state planning treaty, as I mentioned before. So on the next slide, you see the planning instruments. So we do have a state development program dated 2007 already. It's quite old, but we have a current state development plan for the capital region, which is from the year 2019. So this is an actual plan, so to say, with a planning horizon of at least 10 years. So we are working on this. There are some special plans also for airport and brown coal, which I don't mention in detail here. But on the regional level, there are also these regional plannings in the scale 1 to 100,000. Our state development plan is 1 to 300,000. So, and this is also very important to know what can be regulated at which level, in which detail, so to say. And yeah, just one word before I jump into our system in more detail. To the national level, I know that two colleagues from Federal Ministry and Federal Building Authority, they are with us, Jens and Josiane. I mentioned just that we do have the regional, the National Spatial Planning Act, but there's also one National Spatial Plan in force, which is one dedicated to flooding. So this is the only one which is spreading all over Germany. But then there are also some spatial concepts and strategies for spatial development, for from the year 2016, which are, let's say, describing future scenarios, but they are not binding, no binding planning documents. And information system is also provided on national level with the National Spatial Atlas, Deutschland Atlas, where a lot of information about the monitoring is available. On the next slide, then, I will dive a little bit into the formal state development plan of the capital region, and you will see on the next slide then the map, and everything which is on the map is binding. Let's say these are regulations, very strict regulations which we set out, let's say, which are binding for the communities, but also for private investors and so on. You may imagine that the procedure to set up such a binding plan takes a long time, takes a lot of efforts. Colleagues told me that at least 5 years development of such a plan is to be calculated. And then, as I mentioned, so it has a vision for at least 10 years until we set up a new plan. So this is very strict and formalized, as it was mentioned by the colleagues from the OECD, but this is also necessary for, in our opinion, to steer the spatial development and the land use. So on the next slide then, you see we have divided into the city of Berlin, the Berlin suburban area, and further metropolitan area. And I wrote it also on the board already that we have both. We have growth and shrinking in our region. So in the rural areas, there are the areas of the lowest density in all Germany, all over Germany. And we have the metropolis in the middle, Berlin, with a very high densities and a growing population. And we have to deal with this, both aspects. On the next slide, you see all the topics which are covered in the plan. And this is very broad. So we do have climate, flooding and energy, transport, open space development, settlement development, cultural landscapes, public services, central places, and also some chapters about economic development and trade. But it is not linked directly to incentives and to financial instruments, I have to say. So this is more, let's say, setting up the guidelines and the regulations. And these topics in bold, I will show you a little bit in more detail. On the next slide, there's the transport and infrastructure development. Here you can see that we have the interlinkages in the Trans-European network along the transport net corridors, the main corridors, which are crossing Berlin. And we have also the local and regional transport, public transport system shown here, which is quite well developed in our region with an own transport organization. And this is shown here how it works together. It's important if you remember these axes. I will come to this topic of axes later on again. On the next slide, you see then a structure of the capital of the central places in the capital region. So it's Berlin in the center. You see this square This shows the metropolis, and then we have centers of higher order. These are the major regional centers, and we have middle order centers, which are regional centers. And all these centers, they are dedicated with certain functions. So there should be services in place, public services in place, in order to secure the supply of the regions around. It's a kind of centralized but also decentralized system, a mixture, I would say. If we zoom in the next slide a bit more to the topic of settlement development, you see here what we call the Berlin Star. So this is the current settlement structure, which the housing, which is spread along the railway axis. That was a historical development, which we think should be further developed in the future along the public transport services. This should be a kind of backbone for the further settlement development. And regarding the settlement development, I have to say that in Berlin, not shrinking is the major topic today. The topic is housing, housing, housing. The costs of housing and the lack of affordable housing is the most pressing issue these days. And you see here on the next slide then the whole system, let's say, with this combined Berlin Star and the system of the middle order centers, and also centers for basic functionalities in the whole area. This is about, and there are some orders also how dense, in which density, let's say, the settlement should be in certain areas. But settlement is one thing. The other topic which we are dealing as well is the open space, which you can see on the next slide. We have defined, and this is not only the protected areas, it's also areas which should be, let's say, kept free from settlements and housing and industry. This is a system of the open space, an open space network, where the building development and fragmentation is only in exceptional cases allowed. So there are also exceptions possible, but this has to be permitted by our administration if there are deviations of the plan, so to say. This open space is multifunctional, so it's not only agricultural, but most part is agricultural use. But as I mentioned, also protected areas and also some forest areas are included. So that's about our spatial plan on the state level. On the next slide, you see then in our region there are 5 regional planning authorities, which are the counties and the municipalities running these. And this regional planning system, let's say, is then more detailed on that, what we are doing. And the most important thing which we, let's say, order to the regional planning system is to secure the spaces for renewable energies. So we have a federal goal of setting 2% of the land use for renewable energies, especially for wind energy. And these 2% should be, let's say, then integrated in these plans on a regional level. This is ongoing. For 2 regions, we have already achieved this, and 3 regions are still working on this. But this is also the second very hot topic to secure, let's say, enough space, let's say, for renewable energies. And finally, on the next slide and the next slide, the spatial development. Just to give you a hint that we are not only restrictive, but we would also like to foster some developments in our region. And this, we call that informal. So this is not based on acts, and we cannot put the pressure, but we are forming, let's say, coalitions of the willing to create, let's say, some cooperation as a neighborhood forum directly at the borders of Berlin, with the state of Berlin. But also development access is one approach that we would like to reach out along the transport access. Also in a longer distance to cross-border to Poland, to Szczecin, for example, which is the next major city, let's say, bordering our region on Polish side, that we would like to have a look on the impulses the cities are given to the regional cooperation. And also on transnational level, this is especially my part, we are working on projects in the Baltic Sea region and in Central Europe, funded by Interreg on several topics. Actually, one is dealing about metropolitan cooperation governance, where the city of Warsaw is also part of, and the second is dealing content-wise with the topic of hydrogen deployment and all the infrastructure which is included in this. And yeah, by this, I would like to end and thank you for your attention. This was a brief, let's say, look into what we are doing here in our region, the capital region, Berlin-Brandenburg. For further information, you can have a look on the website or just contact me afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this deep dive. It was really interesting, and definitely we'll want to go into the details. But for now, we have to move on. And before the break, the last presentation is by Kristina Keder from Latvia, from the Latvian Ministry of Smart Administration and Regional Development, and she works as head of Spatial Planning Policy Unit there. So go ahead, Kristina.
Thank you, Tiit. I think probably my slides are visible now. Just a second. Yes.
Yes, all good.
Thank you for opportunity and invite to this event. I think it indeed is very useful, knowing also that we are just in front of the door for a new Latvian sustainable development strategy. So today I will a bit more speak on how we are doing it now, according to the documents that we have in force. But also in the very end, maybe to reflect a bit on what we have learned from different processes and policies on what to take into account when planning for the next 20 years. So first of all, I like the Kinga's nice schema on overall system of development planning and spatial planning. If we would put everything in the same way, I think it would look kind of similar or even more complex. But if we are speaking about the spatial planning hierarchy in Latvia, we have determined, according to the spatial planning law, 3 levels. We have national level with the highest document in hierarchy, Sustainable Development Strategy of Latvia, which will be the document I will mainly explain in detail, the spatial development perspective and how it's implemented through different policy, mostly policy documents. Also National Development Plan, which is more connected to the midterm 7-year investment planning. And on national level, we have also maritime spatial planning and the one and only national level thematic plan, which is for coastal area. We also have 5 planning regions that have two main spatial planning documents. One is Sustainable Development Strategy for longer term to establish also this spatial planning perspective, spatial development perspective, detailing the Sustainable Development Strategy for the exact planning region territory, and also development program, which more links to the National Development Plan and investment planning, but territorially. And there is also a possibility for regional level to develop some thematic plans. We do not have exact experience on this. We are just have the first attempt on Kurzeme region that they are actually doing a thematic plan for coastal area. And the main business happens on local level, where we have several, even more documents. Of course, again, everything starts with the long-term sustainable development strategy, which sets the spatial structure of the local municipality and guidance for development. Also development program, which corresponds to the 7-year midterm policy planning and investment planning. And for land use planning, we have spatial or territorial plan. Then we have, which is the main document for setting the land use on local level, and also a basis for issuing building permits. Then we have local plan, which is from content-wise and parts of it are just the same as for the spatial plan, but it can be developed for smaller area of the local municipality, and therefore also amend the part of the territorial plan with the similar force. And of course, there is a possibility to implement, prepare detailed plans for specific project development and different kind of thematic plans that could serve for any of above mentioned planning documents in exact thematic direction. For example, transport or landscapes or public space. Currently, like for local level, we have more than 100 different thematic plans with no, so to say, more statistics on which are the most popular, but probably for transport those are the ones, which kind of also shows the main issues that local municipalities are dealing with. So, as I said, I will more focus on the existing Sustainable Development Strategy for Latvia 2030. It's not very fresh. It's adopted by our parliament on June 2010, so it's been already 15 years almost. But this still serves as the basis for all development planning, with which I mean the policy planning documents and also spatial planning documents in all levels. So both on the governmental level, also for regional level documents that are possible to elaborate, and for decisions and documents on local level. The document itself, it sets priorities, development directions, objectives, directions for concrete actions, and also possible solutions. But here, if you look from the perspective of priorities that are set, there are 7 priorities. Starting from development of cultural space, continuing with investments in human capital, going on with the change of paradigm in overall education, then also creating an innovative and eco-efficient economy, while still preserving the nature and future capital. And then one of the priorities is the perspective of spatial development, which is the only spatial part in this document, consisting of real maps and spatial structure of the whole country. And also more like a governance priority is the innovative government and participation of the society, which was very important back then in 2010, when the real public participation started to be implemented in Latvia according to the newest trends. So yes, if we go further into the spatial matter, so this spatial development perspective as one part of the overall Latvia 2030 strategy, it determines the overall policy directions and focuses on three main aspects. Like the overall spatial structure is based on accessibility and mobility possibilities, as on settlement as the basis for economic development and human life work environment, and also spaces of national interest, unique and specific territories that are very significant for countries' development. And I'm proud to say that this overall spatial development perspective was actually quite a lot inspired by VASAB long-term perspective 2030, according to the accessibility principles and guidance that is also set in the previous VASAB long-term perspective, and also the structure as such is quite inspired by the previous already VASAB long-term perspective. So we do hope that the new VASAB 2040 strategy will inspire the work in Latvia for Latvia 2050 as well. So to detail a bit on these three main aspects, first I would like to start about this accessibility and transport. Within the Latvia 2030 strategy spatial development perspective, main corridors are identified, main, so to say, transportation nodes like airport, ports, railway, also different kind of significances of the transport connections are identified. And what is very important, this was the first document where after VASAB long-term perspective, where also Rail Baltica as a very big national priority was set. So, but if we look from the implementation part, of course, this all the activities that are set here spatially are further detailed through national development plan, when actually also prioritizing investments in transport and different kind of policy planning documents. For example, national transport strategy, and also development programs of bigger ports and development strategy of small ports. A separate example also linking to the spatial planning system is the Rail Baltica example. It was the first attempt to actually establish an object of national interest, which is a possibility to do it through the law. So each sectoral ministry can prepare a proposal for object of national interest, providing exact territory, and finalize the environmental impact assessment conclusions, and the decision is taken by the government, and this decision overrules the local level spatial plan. That's the instrument we have in Latvia. And if we speak about the overall monitoring of the implementation of transport part in the long-term development strategy, this monitoring is done within midterm policy planning process, 7 years of different strategies and programs, sectoral programs, providing midterm reviews and ex post evaluation of the policies indicators. So still this approach is very sectoral. Then, as I already mentioned, the objects of national interest. This is a tool of the spatial planning law since 2011. And we have had several examples of objects of national interest. We can divide them in 4 bigger thematic, so to say, slots. One big slot is security. We have experience with military polygons and objects to be set as an object of national interest. Also, refugees shelter near Riga and the new jail building, which is kind of a critical infrastructure. Also, infrastructure as such, not the building infrastructure. As I already mentioned, the Rail Baltica railway, and we have several examples of transmission networks as a national object of national interest. High voltage transmission in Kurzeme, and also cross-border electricity connections. So far, only with Estonia we have as a national interest objects. And also we have examples in medicine. The National Hospital was defined as the object of national interest, and the National Band Stage in Mežaparks also defined as the object of national interest. Here, a very important point is that not only the object of national interest overrules the spatial plan on the local level, it also does not stop the construction. It has the green light to go on with construction works and finalize a nationally significant building or other development project if it's defined as a national interest. Then the second big part of the spatial development perspective is about settlement, about urban, rural, and functional territories. In the Latvia 2030, we have set 3 main levels. We have Riga as a metropolis. We have development centers of national importance, 9 centers, and we also have development centers of regional significance, 21 town. Also, the strategy shows the functional networks of these development centers in different regions, and more detailed, it's actually implemented within the regional policy strategy, which actually is based on the this structure, and also provides solutions for public services baskets that corresponds to the level of the development center. And if we speak about urban rural planning and linkages, before that, some main goals and guidelines were set in land management strategy, which is unfortunately struggling to be redeveloped, but we are expecting to come up with a proposal in our ministry by 2026, taking into account all the new policy shifts, including the greening aspects and also different kind of climate change influence on land use. But currently, like for 10 years, there is no land management strategy at all in Latvia in force. And also quite a big help for the development of this network, a functional network of settlement is the operational programs for EU funds, setting possibilities for different kind of cities to attract different kind of investments. Also, it concerns the common agricultural policy, which has quite an impact on development of rural areas. And again, if we speak about the overall monitoring of these implementation of the development center perspective, it's within the midterm policy planning process, similarly as it was on the transport. And then the part which is more linked to the spatial planning processes from our perspective is the spaces of national interests that are set in the spatial development perspective, and those are coast of the Baltic Sea as a national value. Those are the biggest water resources as a natural capital asset. It is the eastern frontier or border area with our eastern neighbors. Also area of Riga metropolis and spaces where nature protection, landscapes and cultural histories, territories are concentrated within a high concentration. So here we have different kinds of documents that helps us steer and implement the overall idea of Latvian spatial structure. Just to mention the few, the most important ones. One is the only one thematic plan we have on the national level for the public infrastructure development on the Baltic Sea coast, which is also followed by the local municipalities. That was adopted in 2016 and is valid as the Latvia 2030 strategy until 2030. Then we have a recently adopted Eastern Border Action Plan this year. That's a short-term document that focuses on actions that is important in the eastern border, including the security and resilience questions. We also have quite a new document, which is Landscape Policy Implementation Plan, which focuses on the areas of outstanding landscapes and has some kind of actions that we have to agree with involved institutions on the areas of nationally significant landscapes to be established in the law as well. Still under discussion. That's one of the outcomes of the plan. Then, of course, as I mentioned beforehand, in the very first triangle of overall system, sustainable development strategies of planning region, which do detail the spatial development perspective to their respective region. Also, a formal governance mechanism here for the Riga Metropolis area. It's the Riga Metropolis Cooperation Working Party that is established by our ministry, and all the involved local municipalities and state institutions comes together and now are currently working on establishment or preparation of Riga Metropolis law and prioritizing the actions that should be taken on board first, and it seems that this will be the transport plan. And as for the other documents that these spaces of national interests are implemented or preserved, those are of course river management plans that are developed according to the Water Framework Directive, and existing legislation and individual rules that actually sets direct conditions for local plans. On the local government level, those are for specifically protected areas, nature areas, the management system that is already in place, and also the protection of cultural heritage is set by law. And here the implementation monitoring is a bit more complex because different kind of documents and actions and governance mechanisms involved within the implementation of this part of the development perspective. So, and if we go down from up to the very lowest level, or the local level, where all the decisions on land use are taken and are binding for each inhabitant, then of course the main applicability to the local level is to the sustainable development strategy for local government, because one of the documents part is the long-term spatial structure of the local municipality and the guidance for implementing it. This guidance is mandatory to development of spatial plan of the local government when developing land use and zoning proposals that should be compliant with the overall sustainable development strategy of each local government, and also should not contradict the laws and regulations of higher hierarchy. So in principle, it should be also in line with all the documents above. In practice, it's very it's impossible to be quite sure that it is so unless we have a claim that it's not so. Yes, and here just an example of one spatial development structure of local municipality. It's a municipality near eastern border. You can see the structures and transport networks indicated for the local level. And then according to the structures, you cannot see it very detailed here, but this is a part of the spatial plan that actually includes the same spatial designations as it should be in the strategy. And just to maybe think about more in on the future, since 2010, like not to say that everything, but mostly all has been changed from the policy priorities and new policies to come in and new knowledge that we have. And we can say that reacting to new challenges and still holding on to the existing spatial planning development perspective is quite challenging. Of course, it's happening. It's happening on national policy level. But the problem here is that this spatial distribution is often missing. So to say, the difference of applicability is only according to institutions, like whether those are all municipalities or municipalities in exact region. That's the mostly the maximum of the spatial distribution. And also new challenges are on local level, as there are new functions also coming to the local governance, and functions does not come with the knowledge, so continued capacity building is needed continuously. So just to thinking about Latvia 2050 in process, we can say that the adaptation to the climate change, of course, one of the key topic here, because this is also according to law set as a new function for local governance to adapt to climate change and to establish plans. Different kind of activities are happening, starting from capacity building, regular events, also participation in different kind of cooperation projects, looking into more detail in different aspects of adaptation, like urban greening, like nature-based solutions, and different kind of hazards management that comes out from the climate change. Very important topic also to work on further is energy independence, and this is probably the most crucial now on the local level due to the applications of new wind energy development projects all over Latvia, and thinking how to manage this also spatially, not only technically according to the possibilities of the transmission network. Sustainable mobility is becoming more and more important, and local governments are also already cooperating beyond their borders, learning from international experience and preparing sustainable urban mobility plans. That's an example in Saisis municipality and also in Liepāja municipality, where they have acknowledged the need for this kind of specific planning. The security and resilience, those are the topics that comes above everything. As for the third year in a row, this is the overall government priority, but mostly still, so to say, dealt within the very regulative form by laws and regulations. And also one new topic that comes in this year, as well as the nature restoration law prescribes that each country should prepare their restoration programs or plans for restoration of nature, and specifically for urban ecosystems. There will be quite a lot of challenge in further planning, and also limiting the uptake of green areas, and also green infrastructure, planning of green infrastructure outside of the nature conservation system, in the way that this is not only for the nature conservation, but also for the public space and inhabitants' good well-being. So this is still in process, also with several initiatives by local municipalities and also in our ministry, still to be considered also in the new Latvian strategy. As for Latvia 2050, I can say only that it is in its very, very initial phase. Currently, only the feasibility study has been started, and hopefully by the end of year, the first discussions will start, and it's mostly managed by state chancellery, because they are responsible for the overall preparation of the sustainable development strategy. But still, of course, all the ministries and relevant experts and public will be involved in the process to prepare the best solution for the country. So still not a lot to say on this. But yes, that's in brief the situation we have in Latvia, not focusing on schema, but making it even more difficult, trying to explain the policies that are linked to the implementation of spatial planning development perspective. So yes, thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Christina, and good luck with the new strategy. We have a break now, and let's take still 30 minutes. And let's then reconvene at 40 past, and then take 10 additional minutes compared to the schedule. So thank you to everyone. So it's 40 past, and thank you for coming back, and thank you for joining this second half of the webinar. I will take just a couple of minutes to to present my joy of the fact that mural has taken on, and that we have many comments and questions here, and also countries have positioned them on the right-hand side. I would just like to highlight perhaps a couple of things. So Jürgen has taken a great initiative and already responded to many of the questions that were related to his presentation, and others are welcome to do the same. So Kinga from Poland, Jay, I think from you're still here from the OECD, you're welcome to add your responses if there's specific comments just into the mural. If there's more complex topics that you would like to discuss during the discussion part, we can take these then as well, but any specific questions, feel free to answer them right away. Finland already has a question before the actual presentation, which is great. And then I've also added a couple of new topics here. So some of the countries have already positioned themselves on these circles here. So answering the question how much these topics are a priority for the national spatial strategies or plans. So if you can come back to this this part as well, and add your thoughts here also. And then later in the discussion part, we can address any questions that we have based on the mural, and any longer questions that are perhaps tricky to reply in the mural. Just recopying perhaps the link also to the mural later on. But now for the second part, we have 3 presentations. We have Finland, Lithuania and Estonia, and then the reflections and discussions part. And I would like to now give the floor to Timo Turunen from the Finnish Ministry of the Environment. And Timo works as a senior ministerial advisor at the ministry. So the floor is yours. You're muted still.
Yeah. Okay, can you see now and hear?
Yes, all good.
Okay, thank you, Tiit, and good afternoon to everyone. I have a short presentation of the National Land Use Guidelines. That is the name of the instrument we have for guiding spatial development in Finland nationally. And I want to start with this motivation or mission picture, and I want to emphasize the importance of land use and its planning as part of the development of entire country and its regions. And it is some kind of platform that creates the basis for living conditions and business life, significantly impacting efforts to mitigate climate change and to enhance environmental sustainability. As you can see, the changing operational environment presents ever greater challenges for land use, as shown in this picture. The factors affecting land use are often contradictory and rapidly changing, and spatial planning must withstand changes, adapt to and influence them, and renew itself. And in this situation, spatial planning is truly needed at all levels to stay in tune with the present and future, promoting sustainable development. And planning at the national level is especially crucial to respond to these changing factors. And at the national level, we have 2 instruments and all processes regarding spatial planning. We have on the right side, on the left side, National Land Use Guidelines are statutory planning instrument with legal effects according to the Land Use Act. And on the right side, there is a development perspective for land use in Finland. It is a non-statutory source providing information and maybe inspiration, and it offers inputs for assessing and preparing updates to the national land use guidelines and for many other purposes as well. The national land use guidelines are a part of our planning system in addition to regional and municipal land use plans, and it is the government who decides guidelines after parliamentary hearing. We, Ministry of the Environment, are responsible for drafting the guidelines in close collaboration with other ministries and stakeholders. And we have had 3 government decisions so far. The current decision is from 2017, and guidelines will be updated if necessary according to the Land Use Act. And also, according to the Land Use Act, the guidelines must be taken into account in a way that promotes their implementation, and this applies to both all land use planning and also to activities of state authorities. And maybe the regional land use plans are the primary tool and arena for concretization. In regional planning, the guidelines are integrated with the conditions and other objectives, and they are also presented on a planning map. Ministry of the Environment may issue an order to adhere the guidelines provided that it is necessary for a very important public interest. And in practice, I have to say that the order has not been used so far. However, it has served as a kind of safety net, and in the future, such situation may arise, for example, in matters of security or supply readiness. What is the purpose of the national land use guidelines? I have summarized some of the key points, quoting from the legislative reasoning. First, they determine and reconcile the national land use needs of the various sectors of the state into one coordinated national framework, and they also create land use planning preconditions for implementing national projects, and they promote the implementation of international agreements. And then there are the legal effects. They have to be taken into account, and there is a connection to the sustainable development. And what is also important, that they act as a tool in the advanced guidance of land use planning in nationally important land use issues and promote the coherence and consistency of advanced guidance. Here is the content for the current government decision. It is from 2017. And as you can see, the document is very concise, consisting of 15 pages without any images or something like that. And the core content is in section 3, which includes guidelines divided into 5 parts. And it addresses the most urgent and important issues of national significance and has legal effects on all other planning and activities carried out by government authorities. So, what is nationally important? Here are some key points or emphasis. The first section addresses the spatial structure of the entire country, as well as sustainable community development and urban structure. Promoting a nationwide spatial structure, it should be seen as a polycentric and networked entity based on good connections, and it supports the vibrancy of various regions and utilizes their strengths. and creating capacities for low carbon and resource efficient community development. Here the focus is primarily on the existing structure, particularly the compact urban structure of the largest urban regions. And section efficient transport system requires that land use and its planning must promote the development of a national transport system. It should be based primarily on improving existing connections. The section safe and healthy living environment primarily addresses climate change adaptation and overall security, including supply readiness. And according to the section vibrant natural and cultural environments, it is required that land use and its planning secure nationally significant built cultural environments and landscapes which are based on national inventories. And the guidelines also require promoting the preservation of areas and ecological connections valuable for biodiversity. And currently we are mapping nationally significant ecological connections. The final section focuses on national energy supply needs, requiring preparedness for the production of renewable energy and the logistical solution it necessitates. And the picture on the right side shows that the amount of wind power production had grown at a huge rate. This has been significantly influenced by the regional planning, which, as regarded by the guideline, has designated more suitable areas for wind power production. The guidelines also call for securing the routes and implementation possibilities of power lines and gas pipelines, crucial for national energy supply. And a year ago, we asked stakeholders which issues they believe will require national guidance in the future. And they could choose 1 to 3 items, and these 9 issues emerged as the most important ones. The challenges of climate change and biodiversity remain prominently on the agenda, and the importance of overall security as part of land use has clearly strengthened. And we also asked how the guidelines should be developed by choosing 2 development needs. And perhaps the conclusion is that while the guidelines have been an effective part of the planning system, they require further development to stay current and future-oriented and to have maybe an even stronger impact on land use. To improve the development and effectiveness of guidelines, it is necessary to establish an interministerial liaison network. That is something we are doing right now. This network would facilitate continuous and systematic assessments in collaboration with other ministries, and the main task would be to map national land use needs and evaluate the relevance of the guidelines, taking into consideration the current state and future trends of spatial development. So we must invest in foresight or more attention to foresight, and development perspective for land use in Finland is a new part of national planning This tool is essential for supporting the assessment and timeliness of national land use guidelines, and they are, you can say that they are a tool for monitoring, forecasting, and sustainability the assessment of land use, spatial development, and they create preconditions for responding to and adapting to changes in land use. They help different actors in society to make their activities more sustainable, and they act as some kind of situation room or forum for phenomenon-based strategic and cross-administrative joint development. And finally, they are information and inspiration source that can be used in not only updating of national land use guidelines, but also in all land use planning, political decision making, public debate, and so on. And we are working in 4-year cycles. And the development perspective consists of 3 parts. The continuously maintained situational perspective examines the key changes in regional and urban structure and the factors behind them. And the future perspectives outline possible future developments that must be prepared for in the development of regional and urban structure. And further aim is to identify future scenarios that are unlikely, but if realized, it could have a significant impact on regional and urban structure development. And the last one, development needs or development perspective, assesses the current situation and future trends in terms of sustainable development and various national needs, such as security or climate change, and also they identify different development needs to address these challenges. And I have some examples from the first development perspective we published it a year ago. This includes a summary of the baseline scenario for the future of spatial planning, spatial structure, detailing the likely developments divided into components of spatial structure. And similarly, an analysis has been conducted for alternative development scenarios and the development of urban structures. And this second example is a summary of spatial development or development needs in terms of overall security and supply security. I won't go into these in detail either. However, I can state that land use plays a highly significant and increasingly important role in creating prerequisites and ensuring the necessary resilience. And similar assessments can be made, for example, in terms of climate change and more broadly by reconciling various phenomena and needs. And so this is my last slide. I have compiled some concluding remarks on national land use planning and its development needs. And the first one, land use matters. It is really a key part of all development of all country and regions, and that's why planning should be invested in. And there are more and more national interest in land use, the promotion of which is important for overall benefit of the entire country. And these guidelines, it is acceptance and commitment are necessary. There have to be national significance. We have to respect the self-government of municipalities, and we have to work together and interactively, and we have to have common and coordinated guidelines. And when we are going to develop these guidelines, they must be clear and impressive. Maybe it could be some kind of combination of visionary, strategic framing, tax setting, and regulatory element, and using these effectively. And we have to notice that the operating environment changes sometimes very quickly. That's why guidelines must be able to be changed just in time and in the future. And for attention to foresight, we have to have some kind of common situation room and systematic and continuous monitoring of national needs and the up-to-dateness of guidelines in close cooperation with other ministries. And finally, it is very important that we act in the same direction in all land use planning and government actions, and maybe planning in future, or maybe nowadays it is a really human kind of synergy with learning and thinking, where winners are all and the whole country, and each area is more like wise. And thank you very much. And we have more information. I have told you about these national land use guidelines and development perspectives, and they are available in English and also in Swedish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Timo, and thank you for focusing on the implementation part as well. Really important, obviously, for all the national strategies and plans. The next presenter is from Lithuania, and I now give the floor to Mindaugas Pakainis, who works as the head of urban planning unit at the Lithuanian Public Institution Construction Sector Development Agency. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mindaugas. My background is an architect. Most of my job I spent as urban planner and worked a long time for Vilnius municipality, trying to get the best planning solutions for the capital city of Lithuania. So, as it was said already in the beginning of our meeting, our region is experiencing huge demographic problems with a decline. We are losing population, and this development, this negative development, was stopped a bit with inflow of refugees from Ukraine. But actually, the biggest problem with the negative demography is low birth rates, and through that the society does not reproduce itself, and only by immigration we can keep it more or less flowing. The other thing, as also was mentioned in the beginning, is growing old age dependency. So at the moment we don't look that bad, but when we look at the projection of 2050, we see that we'll be among the worst regions in the whole Europe, and it will be even worse as it is in Greece at the moment. So the Greece is surviving somehow, so we will survive as well, but it will be the society when one old person will be helping to other old persons to survive. So we have to prepare our planning and to prepare our public infrastructure for the society being a lot older than it is now. This population decline causes great declines in the municipalities. In 25 years, some of them declined up to 40%, and if we do the projection, so we see that in another 25 years, they will decline the same. Actually, some popularities will be only about, let's say, 20 to 30 former population left. So planning for us does not mean the development, but it means shrinking. We don't need new schools to be built in the falling regions. We need schools to be closed. And that is really a huge political issue and a huge issue for the planners to do decisions on that. In Lithuania, we have 3 levels system of territorial planning, so-called complex documents, which have all the complexity of all the requirements and strategies. They are national level, so state level, the whole state. Then there are municipal plans, which must be made for the whole municipality, and there are local plans, which are done for the city quarter, city block, or even a small settlement. What is really special in the country that municipal plans they have a big power, because building permit can be issued under the guidance of the municipal master plan. So you can imagine in my picture you see a master plan of one municipality, and you don't see any local infrastructure, you don't see the roads, you don't see nothing, but you can issue a building permit just looking into that plan. That means that actually real regulation to stop the urban sprawl in the falling demography is kind of impossible issue, and municipalities actually are facing really big troubles when people are moving out of the town to control the development, because all the suburban area, if it's marked as possible settlement, you can do detailed plan, you can issue a building permit there. So we tried to deal with all that with our Master Plan 2030, which was approved just some years ago. And from earlier periods, we got the scheme of settlement in Lithuania when we have 5 big cities: Vilnius, Kaunas, Panevėžys, Šiauliai, and Klaipėda. These like 5 major urban hubs, and we have smaller satellites around them. And the master plan speaks about the cooperation and sharing the services among all those cities, that only in cities you can get all services, and the further you get to the smaller urban center, the less services the less services you get. So on the other hand, it says about the need of cooperation between the municipalities, but as always in the when the different political parties are in different municipalities, sometimes it is very hard to communicate, and we have only few examples of good communication between municipalities, let's say solving infrastructure problems, water supply, or public transport arrangement like it is in Tauragė region. Myself, working in Vilnius, I often saw a situation when from Vilnius municipality streets comes here and from Vilnius region comes here, and they don't even meet together on some point. And this kind of normal situation when you speak with the architects from the municipalities. Compactness of the development was one of the biggest requirement set in our new master plan of the country, and it says that if you foresee new development, you have to have analysis, you have to have forecasts which show that you really need those areas, that you can develop new residential areas only when you have existing infrastructure. You are obligated to limit development when you don't have infrastructure, and even if in planning, which already happened before, you have planned too much, you have to replan them back, let's say, to replan back into the nature. That is nice slogans, but when we think about real tools to control on that, we have really big discussions with the municipalities and also with the property owners, because the master plan does not say exact figures, what kind of analysis you need, what prognosis you can choose, how much of development you can foresee, what time period you should calculate, and then it's always a game that you have to hire a good sociologist or good urban planner, and he can prove whatever you like. So actually, I see that here in this point we have we have not enough the regulation which was set in our master plan of the state, and this is just wishes but not clear regulation. Our master plan says that as we have population decline, we should increase effectiveness of the services. So all, as you see also in these slides, let's say all smaller municipalities, they have too much infrastructure. It is education, health, social care or culture. This is very hard to say, but the master plan says that you have to compact them somehow, reduce them somehow, because otherwise the infrastructure cannot function and cannot fulfill the functions. The health care will be not sufficient for you to survive, because it will be not financed enough if we keep the same as it is. So again, this is the strategy. But when the mayor sees the scheme where his municipality needs to shrink healthcare or has to shrink the schools, it's a big political issue, and also the public bodies in the state level, they don't have to really act up to this plan. And also municipalities, it says that you should shrink, but does not say how much and when, and normally we have nice strategy, but the implementation isn't that nice as we could wish. But we were doing master plans still in those period when we were thinking to be the hub between East and West. This is all three Baltic countries. I think that's the same. And then suddenly we understood there is no East anymore. We have a dark hole there, and we should rethink everything, actually. We don't have East-West connection, Belarusian fertilizers going to Klaipėda port and giving for the port a lot of income and a lot of income for the railways. And the infrastructure which was thought to be our basement, the base of our survival, economical income, now becomes the thing which we need connect to the outer world to survive, not to earn from the survival, but we need this communication to survive. So we need to build a wall here, and we need to arrange our infrastructure a bit other way. Let's get connection with somebody. That is completely different principle which we should rethink when we will and rediscuss. The master plan had a big infrastructure development plan, so making the road network better quality, highways, bypasses, the extension of the rail network, even building the new local network lines to connect smaller Lithuanian cities as Druskininkai, Alytus to railway network, to electrificate the major line from Vilnius to Klaipėda, to arrange better links with Klaipėda port. And one more important thing is that in our master plan of the state, we also settled that we need to orientate on sustainable mobility. So actually it was a big topic in the former elections in municipalities. Let's say that's topic of narrowing the streets. Now we have narrowed the road from Molėtai to Utena, so Latvian friends which will be driving from Vilnius from Latvian city Daugavpils to Vilnius could try that, how it works when even the road is made a bit smaller, not that wide as it was. And actually, this thinking of that infrastructure is firstly for the people, then for the bicyclists, then for public transport, and then for the cars. This was the basic principle which we want to implement also in the master plans of the municipalities. But it's still big discussion in the publicity about that. Of course, Rail Baltica project is one of the biggest things we have at the moment with our connections with outer world, and it goes quite well. And I think aim of all three Baltic countries is to get it as soon as possible, because it looks as it is our project which can give for us a bit more guarantees for survival, even in case of emergency, but not also in emergency, but also in the case of when we see economical development perspective. And we hear a lot of now criticism we heard in different countries, and I think they are coming from one neighbor country, which is very clear for us, trying just to stop that investment. And so actually we have to have very clear solution to support this project as much as it's possible. Via Baltica project is another major connection with the roads from Warsaw to Tallinn, and also Polish side has already done the highway from Warsaw to Lithuanian border. Just one bypass of Lomža is missing. Lithuania is finishing small part between Kaunas and the border, and then we have the whole part from Kaunas to Tallinn. And also we as the planners from three Baltic countries would think, why shouldn't we planning to do it as a normal highway? Because also it's a speed that it's us being more connecting and adding it and acting together and making it as one economic development zone. What is specific in Lithuania planning system, that we have big tradition of planning natural frameworks. It's already 30 years of having those in our master plans. So actually we have all these migration corridors, natural frameworks, all stabilization areas which are needed for the ecological reasons. We have this in our master plan, and then municipalities doing their plans should look at that. They can plan a bit differently, but if you have major corridors passing your municipality, you cannot avoid them. Another special thing I have never seen in other plans, we have also aesthetic potential on landscape. The darker color is, the more variety in height in landscape is, and that means that the landscape is more affected if you build, let's say, wind generators or things like that. And these darker areas are more valuable, and we have national parks there. And actually, this, when we plan infrastructure, this kind of regulation help for us also deal with this renewable energy things, when we now have inflow of batteries and inflow of wind generators coming to all over the country. Our master plan also speaks about identity of the regions, but it's just wishes. It's not regulation. We don't have specific values which each region has to keep. So actually, it's more saying for the municipalities that you should get your special identity and try to celebrate your own country and the country of your own region. Also, our master plan has big parts for bioproduction, for forestry. A lot of efforts were made, a lot of time was spent, and a lot of text was written. But actually, it also just wishes and not regulation. For example, if our Minister of Agriculture is supporting the farmers they are not looking at the plan. Although, for example, fertilization in some areas is more sensible as in others, but not the master plan is the document they look at, and that is kind of pity. And we think how to integrate this kind of solutions we have in master plan in our real life, because it's a bit a declaration and less regulation. We also have set the reservation of areas limitations of development in the state level in this document. So actually you see all border regions, some limitations because of the special border status. Also the limitations to build wind generators, wind electric generators, and also the land which will be taken for Rail Baltica and Via Baltica projects is in this plan. So if municipality does its own plan, this thing should be detailized and should look more deeply in their plans. So master plan is kind of as everywhere text document with drawings. It's about 600 statements, and generally ministry was always having hard to implement it with the municipalities. So my team was established in construction sector development agency as an urban development division, and we actually are responsible for supervising of planning of municipalities, and that they don't contradict with the decisions of master plan of Lithuania. But as I said, it's not very clear what is regulation, what is requirement, and what is just the wish to be so. So we did big analysis trying to find out. So these 600 statements, then we split them in 1,400 statements, which is actually you can get your mind crazy trying to remember all that. But in the end, we found just really there are just very few of them, or not so many of them, which really mean something for doing municipal plans. So actually we're thriving a lot through the municipalities, helping local architects, because municipality, it's good when it has at least one architect working for the small community. So they need really support from us to get their work done. And we were working on our supervision of municipal master plan, monitoring of implementation. So we will collect data and then give it to the municipality and to the Ministry of Environment to see the success or how we succeed in proceeding. We are responsible for doing planning norms because actually we don't have them at the moment. Green infrastructure, and we're helping the Ministry of Environment on developing principles of IT systems on issuing building permits, because they are very related to the regulation set in the territorial planning documents. So municipal master plans, all municipalities have them, but when we want it as a sheet, as a set of data, only master plan of Vilnius is done that way, that you click on the area and you get the requirements you have for it, and as it is said that you can issue a building permit up to this kind of document. So then in other municipalities, you have to read 500 pages of text trying to find out what kind of limitations will be to build single family house somewhere. So actually we see it as a big problem because it does not set anything very clear, and it's always possible to get claims from both sides, also from other institutions that you have issued building permit, or from the people that you. So together with that regulation that the building permits can be issued in this municipal level, we have some pluses. It goes faster, but on the other hand, we have some sort of disaster if we want to try to get better. What we found in doing the master plans of municipalities that you don't have to regulate always. You sometimes have to encourage. And this in Vilnius was done by encouraging of making lively ground floors instead of putting garages on the ground floor. If you put let's say permits which invites people to come, which is suitable for commerce or from social function, you can get 10% more square meters. And this attracted developers not to build closed premises on the ground floors, and through this we got much more liveliness in livability in Vilnius town. And we think that this practice we could use also in the national level to encourage municipalities to do right things, for example, to stop sprawl or to organize infrastructure in better way. The same thing was in Vilnius done with underground garages. If you do underground garage, you get 10% more square meters, you get nicer area above, and then you're free of cars. On the other hand, we got a shelters, which now are kind of thing we have to think about, thinking about next future. But as I said, municipal master plans, they are done without paying big attention to real into real development perspective. For example, this is Klaipėda master plan, this is the area which was planned for as a possible area for development. And if you see Klaipėda a bit built up area, this is 5 times bigger. And when we look at the development possibilities, we see heights up to 20 meters and intensities up to 0.8 or even 2.5. This is for the city center. It's not for the suburban area. That means that such a master plan says that you can build everything you want, everywhere you want, and it's not a regulation at all. So we have to deal with that, trying to change that into some sort of more reliable, more valuable regulation. For that, we prepared data for the municipalities just to watch out what they have, what is coming. So working with Lithuania Data Agency, we did geodata on each block actually in the country, where you can see the amount of inhabitants, the age of inhabitants, even the source of income of those inhabitants. So you can really predict the further development of the area. You can calculate school children and to see where schools are built. And at the moment we are working to get also data from our real estate register as a data which you also can use find right figures for building densities and intensities to find out how much square meters is still possible to build in the area. Using that data, we did investigations on the development of our biggest cities, and we found out in 10 years about 10% of our population in the biggest cities moved to suburban areas, which is kind of big amount of people which moved outside. On the other hand, we see that in Vilnius, the 13,000 people moved into the city center. In Klaipėda, 2,000 people. So then the municipalities can compare which policies were used, which policies were better to make the cities more livable and more inviting to live and to spend time there. So seeing that data, you can compare municipalities and you can compare principles in different regions of Lithuania. Also the same you can see of the growth of suburban areas. Using the data, you see how much square meters was eaten by the urban development among bigger cities of Lithuania. So this data now we give for the planners, and they are responsible to give for us back their prognosis and analysis based on the data, not on the feelings, because it's actually the first time when we are doing more database solutions and less feelings feelings-based solutions. Thinking on VASAB influence on our planning system, actually for us, to tell you the truth, for us the planning of European Commission looks more reacting to the time needs and actual status of the country, because as we see TEN-T network, where we actually, which is actually our connecting network to European network of roads and railways, we see that the policy of being between East and West was changed, and now even the new Baltic Sea, Black Sea, Aegean Sea corridor is planned through Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and Ukraine is trying to be attached to that system of roads, which actually reacts to the real situation much quicker and much more active. When we see the VASAB vision of 2040, we still see that it's kind of fluffy vision, which actually has blurred this area east from us, hoping that the better times will come and it will change, and then we can see it again as one region. But look, just few days ago, we were plugged into Europe and we cut away the whole energetic system of Russian Braille ring. That means that we are cutting strings, not keeping them. We are trying to cut and to survive somehow. So looking on that, we have always to remember that it's land of ox, just 30 kilometers away from my office, and actually the best scenario for us is to keep it as it is now. There is not a big chance that this land of ox will be blue again in next coming years. So actually for us, this inner connections between different countries, they are really very important. And looking into our strategies, which we have, especially on infrastructure development, we should really think all three Baltic countries, do we really need, let's say, the Russian railway track, Russian standard, because the best scenario is that with 30 years we'll be not having Russian trains going through our countries. We should think, do we need support the links to the Russian ports where the oil tankers are coming and cutting our links to our energetic cables going to another side of the sea, and we should think about further integration between these countries which are on both sides of Baltic Sea. So I think it's all task of all the planners to have it also in our national agendas, thinking on these major issues. And with these words, I would like to thank you and to hope that the future of Baltics is clear, and we all be responsible on that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for taking also this on the regional level and for explaining the new national plan. There's also some questions to you on the mural. If you can log on and have a look then, and perhaps already answer some of them in mural, then that would be helpful. Otherwise, we can take them during the discussion. But now for the last presentation, we have my colleague here in Estonia, Anna Semyonova, who is responsible for the new Estonian National Spatial Plan in progress, and she works as an advisor at our Spatial Planning Department at the Estonian Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications. So, Anna, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Tiit. I will try to share my screen. One moment. Good afternoon. My name is Anna Semyonova, Tiit's colleague from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications, and happy to introduce you our big process at hand, the preparation of new spatial plan of Estonia. looking ahead to 2050. Our goals, key messages, and challenges that we have so far. So, first, the general overview of the process. The National Spatial Plan is the most strategic and general spatial plan of the country. It is developed, but the Estonia 2050 is developed for the entire mainland of Estonia. We have excluded the marine area because its development directions were determined in Estonian Maritime Spatial Plan approved just a few years ago. So in this spatial plan, we don't deal with sea area, but we aim to define the spatial development principles and directions for the mainland. And we do this in close cooperation with planning firm called Hendrikson and with the wide expert groups involved into this process. So our timeline is divided over 4 years. The process will be completed in November 2026. So we're currently in the middle of the process, and I would say this is the most important year ahead of us. Our baseline studies are nearly completed, providing us different key messages and guidance for developing the planning solution. And in the second half of this year, we will start to develop action plan that how to implement all the guidelines and principles that we work out during the process. So what kind of means, policies, and investments are necessary to implement all these guidelines. And implementation, I would say, is the most crucial and the hardest part in making all kind of development plans. Here you can see our different topics that we cover in our National Spatial Plan. The topics are interlinked with each other, they influence each other: settlement structure, technical infrastructure, natural resources, valuable agricultural land, our green network, our transport and mobility issues. But compared to previous national spatial plans, climate issues as well as security and safety have become increasingly more important than before. And in the core, you can see the main strategic focus that is coming from our National Development Plan Estonia 2035, that covering all this or dealing with all these topics, we have to keep in mind that we create sustainable and safe, high-quality living environment that considers the needs of all inhabitants. So this is like the main slogan. So how the plan forms? Our National Spatial Plan provides starting from the left. National Spatial Plan provides spatial output for different EU and national development plans and strategic objectives. Our process is regulated by the Planning Act and the planning principles that are coming from Planning Act. All the different goals from different strategies are often contradictory, and our task here is to create this common and comprehensive vision of these different objectives. And this common vision should set guidelines and principles for more detailed level spatial plans, both in national and local level. And we're working hard at the moment to combine these different strategies and create this overall spatial rules. And what is missing at our system at the moment is the fact that our spatial planning system is not linked, or is very poorly linked with our strategic planning system. So this is the box here on the right hand. So this is something that we want to conquer in our new process by the end of 2026, that this common vision that National Spatial Plan creates, that this will be the basis for new strategic development and sectoral plans that Estonia creates. So moving on, as I mentioned before, as I showed before on our timeline, we started our process with different baseline studies together with our broad expert group involved to this process. And the purpose of conducting these different studies and analysis is to support the preparation of our planning solution based on data and knowledge. As Lithuania also mentioned, we want to make more data-based decision rather than feeling-based. And there are many topics covered in National Spatial Plan, as I showed before on the scheme, but settlement development and more balanced regional development are one of our key focus areas in this new process. Our key challenge is how to turn the settlement development from regional imbalance toward more regional balance development. So we have to take into account our demographic change, and as Lithuania and other Baltic states, we are a declining nation. So this is quite challenging how in these circumstances move toward this regional balance spatial pattern. And in order to address these topics, we have created 4 different scenarios, and we are analyzing the population trends, the necessary investments, the necessary policies, and the what kind of environmental impact these scenarios give on our territory. So starting from scenario A, it is basically the 0 scenario, so to say, where we adapt and keep up with the trends, where the population and economy continues to concentrate to capital region. In scenario B, that means that Estonia consists of 3 to 4 large urban regions. Besides Tallinn, Tartu, Pärnu, and northeast urban areas are the points where the concentration of settlement is guided. In scenario C, this is like more evenly spread development around our country, where our county centers and small centers are very livable. And scenario D is the big immigration scenario due to the climate change or security and safety reasons. So these are the base analysis, base spatial policy choices that we deal with and analyze. And yes, the population forecast is sad to Estonian case. We can see that in each scenario, the population of Estonia is declining either way, except the scenario D, the big immigration scenario. But we can see that our settlement structure is changing, with strong suburban areas emerging, because when in growing regions the growth is not targeted to city centers, but it is more like supporting urban sprawl And yeah, so we can see from the forecast that some regions, no matter how much effort we put with different policies or strategies will continue to decline. These are the red areas in the middle of Estonia and in the eastern and southeast part. And our capitalization continues in all scenarios. So capital region will grow in every scenario. In our baseline study, we also looked at how strong are our cities and their centers. So again, in this map, we can see that our influence area of Tallinn continues to grow. This is the light blue color on the maps compared to 2011, and today almost half of Estonia is under capital region influence. So the need for mobility and distances continue to grow. The importance of large urban regions has increased over the past 10 years. Some smaller cities or county level cities have diminished. And yes, the dispersed settlement development, urban sprawl, and the challenge is strengthening the centers are the key issues based on the data analysis. So moving forward with our key messages and key topics, the work we have done so far, the analysis we have carried out, they have highlighted the spatial scarcity that has arisen as a result of would say competing land uses and this sprawling land use pattern. The spatial competition and the need for well thought out approach for spatial rules is crucial. So we need like synergy and combined land use rules for different strategies and objectives that are coming from the EU level or from the state level. So the photo illustrates as an example how nature and built environment can be combined and how this like combined land use can be implemented. We also made a map that shows the spatial competition and spatial scarcity. If we put together on top of each other all our spatial values, we see that there is a very few unrestricted areas. These are these white dots that don't have any kind of restrictions. So on this map we have national protected areas, Natura 2000 areas, valuable agricultural land, green network, valuable landscape. So basically everything is covered with restrictions, so to say. So again, we need combined land use rules necessary for implementing all the objectives into our space. Some examples of this combined land use methods, nature-based solutions in residential areas or in public space. So we have possibilities, we just need to point them out and address them. Another key message is that we have very resource-intensive land use in Estonia. In one part of the regions we have massive urban sprawl, while in the other areas are shrinking. And again, the need for different policies in addressing both the growing and declining areas are necessary to achieve in Estonia 2050. Another example of EU policy that needs to be integrated to our planning solutions, EU soil strategy and land take hierarchy. We need to think how to how to implement this into our spatial planning system, but this is a very important strategy, important policy that we have to take into account, and that could help us in tackling with the urban sprawl. So the land take hierarchy from EU soil strategy says that we need to avoid additional land take as much as possible. If we can't avoid, we need to reuse the land. This is like we should take into use, like for example, brownfield areas. If we can't avoid or reuse, we should minimize new land take. And if we can't do these previous steps, then it is necessary to compensate the land take. And again, we have to figure out how to implement this strategy in different part of region, in growing areas and in shrinking areas, because the policies, yes, should be like place-based specific. And here is a map that illustrates again the land take and urban sprawl around capital region. So as a solution here, what we're thinking, we see that in order to encounter all these different challenges that the national level spatial plan could be applicable in lower detail level plans, we should work on with this cross-sectoral and spatial regulations that consider different settlement typology. Different topics that we need to address, whether they are urban densification or urban greenery or compact settlement development or land use reduction. We aim to give these guidance throughout these topologies because the challenges vary in different parts, but as Lithuania, for example, in his previous presentation talked about, like if we take city center, then we should state that lively ground floors are necessary, or that in suburb regions or city regions the car parking should be underground. So the underground parking policies and different objectives we can give to this different settlement typology and guide the spatial pattern and spatial planning through these rules. So again, examples about urban densification, more example like in urban areas we should have mixed use land use, emphasize on public transport, integrate public space with green infrastructure with each other. In suburban areas, this is like a bit overwhelmed picture about suburban areas, but this is how the urban sprawl, this is what kind of space the urban sprawl has created near Tallinn or other bigger cities around in bigger cities in Estonia. So we aim to also bring livability into this suburb regions. Again, emphasize on mixed use, that we need to have housing and different services in these new living environments. We have to well connect them with public transport and different public services are also necessary to bring there. So to conclude, as in the beginning said, we have to keep in mind that in covering all our different topics, we have to keep in mind sustainable development. And it is good to understand first, to have these discussions with policymakers and decision makers, that what is not sustainable. Not sustainable is population decline and imbalance in age structure. And on the other hand, the rapid and sudden population growth in other parts of regions. Not sustainable development are the structural changes in our urban systems, the long distance commuting or increased distance between work and services, growing security risks in depopulating rural areas, and increasing land consumption and environmental pressure that comes with it. So we have very good data-based maps and illustrations that show what we are at the moment for keeping the negotiations and collaborating with different stakeholders and trying to find solutions how to encounter them. So the big questions and challenges in Estonia 2050 are how to combine different sectoral policies to guide spatial development, how to work out this combined land use rules. Will the future of Estonia be in large urban regions or small centers? What kind of network of service centers can we afford to maintain? What is the spatial vision that forms the basis for future sectoral development plans and more detailed planning? And we need to work place-based policies to deal with decline and growth, and of course many more other topics at hand in this process. But thank you for listening, and I will end here right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. We are well on track, and we can now move on to the last part of our webinar. What I would like to do now is firstly to give the floor to Pille Metspalu, who I will introduce shortly. But after that, we could together go through mural, and there's some questions that perhaps could be addressed by country representatives or presenters, and there's probably additional reflections or questions, so we can have quite an open discussion after a short reflection by Pille. But now I give the floor to Pille Metspalu, who works at or represents two organizations today. She works as a spatial planning researcher and also spatial planning lecturer at Tartu University in Estonia, but also works as head of spatial planning unit at Hendrikson, which is a planning consultancy in Estonia. And go ahead, Pille.
Thank you so much, Tiit, and hello everybody. It's a nice view that there's still 43 people present after this long and very, very insightful seminar. So yes, to begin, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks for all their speakers for their really informative presentations. And it was truly a fascinating stories we heard, actually, and I do feel honored to have the opportunity to share some reflective thoughts based on what we have heard today. I believe that actually within these 4 hours we have gathered enough material for at least one solid scientific article about governance and spatial planning issues. And there is certainly plenty of food for thought, at least for us Estonians, throughout the entire process of drafting our national spatial plan. But just as a side note, I was looking up just yesterday some articles or academic literature. What does it say about national level spatial planning? And it is interesting that it is generally regarded as a regulatory tool characteristic to Europe, and regardless of how much emphasis is placed on making the plan practically usable at the local level. It is a regulative national level tool. And of course, several planning scholars have lately pointed out that the need to comply with climate goals will definitely lead to a shift towards more centralized or normative or directive approaches in spatial planning. However, I think our discussions today have shown that the reality is maybe a bit more nuanced, at least in the Baltic Sea region. The situation is really quite diverse. And yes, despite maybe facing similar challenges, we have discovered, I think today, that there are fundamentally different approaches, and we are using a variety of tools to address these challenges, which is indeed fascinating for me, at least as a planner. But to continue, as an observer, I basically try to identify patterns or logic in the key messages that kept appearing on the mural board and of course were conveyed during the presentations. And I must say I'm a big fan of these visual tools, so I also try to anticipate what kind of outcomes there will be. And my biggest concern actually was that maybe all the flags or the sticky notes will end up in the how to call it, the bullseye of the target. So everything is equally very important or of very high importance, like the election in the North Korea or something like that. And luckily that didn't happen. Instead, we got a much more diverse and thought-provoking picture as a reference for further use. I think it is really a good board where we can maybe continue discussing or even finding new solutions for the national level planning in our countries. But to proceed with the reflections, I'd like to take a moment to highlight some personal key takeaways from our discussions today. I think the starting presentations from OECD representatives were something like a contemporary Bible for the planners, emphasizing all the right things. For instance, reminding us that how to sum up this, maybe that planning is not the question, but it is the answer, that turning problems into an opportunity is really the message we have to convey most of all to our decision makers. And of course, the enforcement of plans being inconsistent in many cases, and also weak influence on local decision making is I think, something that we all have witnessed in our different countries. And now, based on OECD studies, we also know maybe some of the reasons for that, like vague language, clear mandates not agreed upon, and so on. And of course, the implementation gap, which is something that also planning scholars keep debating about actively right now, and and we also heard it from several presentations as well. But I think the first part of our seminar really conveyed strong messages. So the spatial planning to function successfully is stronger aligning mechanisms for the plans are needed, including financial incentives, which is really something we talk about in Estonia as well. But afterwards, next up in line was Poland with National Development Concept 2050, where the procedural scheme was actually very similar to the one we have in Estonia, and I believe several other countries as well. I liked very much the vulnerability-based challenges on the map. I think, at least I took a mental note of it. This is, I think, an approach that might work elsewhere as well. And of course, the 7 key conclusions as strategic choices for the government level development policy, these seemed like a very clearly understandable approach, which I think we in Estonia will definitely follow as well. Then we had a nice presentation from Germany, describing already a performing system or system in place in Berlin, Brandenburg. So yes, Germany does have a bunch of plans in place. I was really impressed, and especially maybe by the state development plan of the capital region with everything on the map you showed us was binding. So this was really exceptional. I can't imagine how does it really work, but in Germany, I believe it does. And of course, the star-shaped development plan and maybe railway being the backbone of the spatial structure. This is something I think almost all of us can relate to. They are already kind of buzzwords in national level spatial planning. And additionally, maybe the renewable energy planning targets, the 2% approach is also something that we might want to consider in some maybe other countries and in Estonia as well, because we are really having a hard time planning wind parks here in Estonia right now. Then we had Latvian case. And I was actually struck by a very specific approach or the very extensive use of objects of national interests as a tool. And then there was a national policy level missing spatial distribution. That was something that Christina emphasized. And if we could have had more time, I'd really wanted to learn more about that. But maybe we can continue discussing on mural board in that sense. And of course, we actually face similar challenges in Estonia, like implementing nature restoration law, green infrastructure outside the nature conservation system. This all rings a bell for us, so I think we can continue cooperation and finding balanced solutions here. Finland have a long list of different terms and words here as well. So national land use guidelines, and thank you, Timo, for stressing again that land use planning matters. I think this is the destiny of planners, that we have to keep stressing that yes, land use planning and planning in all is very important. The conciseness of the document is yes, very impressive, 15 pages. And of course, polycentric spatial structure, improving existing connections in transportation, a safe and healthy living environment, vibrant nature and cultural environment. All this makes very much sense to us as well. And what was new for me, at least, was that Finland is also currently mapping the significant ecological connections. I think this is something that we are trying to do as well in our national spatial plan also, but not on a very detailed level, but more like a conceptual approach. And what I was really surprised about is the one message that was on of Timo's slide, that the implementation part, that all the guidelines have to apply at the same time in every location or every spot. So this is something that I think would like to know more about, especially implementing on local level. So how will this work? But yes, this was interesting. Lithuania, I think I already had the pleasure of listening to Mindaugas's presentation. I think it was the national security seminar in VASAB, and the striking images and maps Mindaugas is showing to really make us see that the spatial structure of Baltic states has fundamentally changed. This is, I think, the most important thing that we have to concentrate on in our national level plans, and also the interrelated lines or transportation corridors, transmission lines, so on. These are the new topics for us as well. I would like to thank Mindaugas, I think, for being really honest with us, really reflecting on your challenges. I think we feel the same. We also balance between kind of expectations from local municipality that the national level plan should provide exact numbers. Then at the same time, we would like to keep the flexibility as OECD presentations also emphasize. So this is something we also relate to very much. And yes, our own national spatial plan, as Anna was telling, for us, also the implementation part is crucial, and we have some shortcomings right now. The links between strategic and the spatial plans are a bit weak or even non-existent, but we are working on that, so hopefully this will be better soon. And I think we are really in the middle of the process, so discussing different development scenarios and the ways how to achieve a more balanced regional development in a shrinking country. So this is again something that we will actually like to discuss more about with you. And for us, at least the team of planners who are working with National Spatial Plan, I think the combined land use is a concept that we see that might be worthwhile, that we really do think that it can be at least tried out, how to implement it. So I hope that soon we will have more information and experience on that to share with you as well. So to sum up my reflections, it is clear that no single blueprint plan actually fits all, but I think that sharing knowledge and experience, we really indeed are taking important steps towards more effective and adaptable spatial planning and spatial planning systems. So I do look forward to seeing how these insights evolve into real-world solutions, and hope that our paths cross again in future discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pille, for these reflections. Many of these reflect also my own reflections, so very valid. Thank you very much.